Acts chapter 3, verse 1. Now Peter and John went up together to the temple at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour. And a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms from those who entered the temple, who, seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, asked for alms, and fixing his eyes on him with John, Peter said, "Look at us." So he gave them his attention, expecting to receive something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." There is a concern in the passage that arises at this point. The concern revolves around the idea of "I give you." You'll note in verse 6 it says, Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have, I give you." It's the Greek word didomai, and it's in the active voice, which immediately tells you that Peter is responsible for the giving. Now, there's several ideas that cluster around that, but the concern of the whole idea is that Peter is taking claim for what he's going to give to this individual. He is responsible for giving it. In one sense, that's really neat, because that's a whole change in attitude for Peter, because he doesn't give anything to anybody and never has. His focus has always been on himself. Now his focus is totally on someone else, and a lame man that he can't get anything from, or there's no advantage to being with. I mean, a lame beggar, like he's going to put a lot in the offering? Oh, come on. So there's no reason to mess with him. He would be better to go on into the temple and glean from those who have prosperity. But he is going after a lame beggar. And what's the purpose of that? And the fact that he says, "I give you," which again is in the active voice, meaning he's responsible for the giving. So the concern of that whole thing is, well, is he really taking claim for this miracle? Now, of course, that's cleared up for us, just so there's no confusion at all, that's cleared up for us as you march into the rest of the chapter. Because as they go into the porch, Solomon's porch, and the crowd begins to gather, and this man is running around, you will note distinctly that down in verse 12, that Peter is abhorred, he is awestruck, he's just deeply disturbed that anybody would think he was responsible for this. So he turns to the crowd and says, "Or why look so intently at us, as though by our own power or godliness we made this man walk?" So definitely he's saying to the crowd, "Hey, you're looking at us like we did this. Hey, no. Let's get this record straight real clear. I didn't do this. This was not a product of us. We didn't do this miracle by our power. This was not done in our strength." I want to clear that up. Then he begins to move into his message to this crowd. And as he gives this message, he clarifies how this miracle took place. And he does it in verse 16, which is a verse you need to look at. Now, obviously, we haven't in our study gotten to verse 16 and won't for, I hope I live that long. But you guys are nasty. This is the new year. Turn over a leaf, will you? In verse 16, he is giving an overwhelming statement about faith. And he says in verse 16, "And his name," of course the name of Jesus, which when you say name means person. So we're really talking about the person. So the person of Jesus, through faith in the person of Jesus. See how he does that twice? And his name, through faith in his name, has made this man strong. So faith is a key element to this whole thing. That in giving what I was doing when I said I give you what I have, it's not I'm taking responsibility for it. I'm not that I did the miracle, but that this is a focus that's going on in my life. And through faith, my faith and your faith linked together is doing something in this man's life. So he says in verse 16, "His name, through faith in his name, has made this man strong, whom you see and know. Yes, the faith which comes through him has given him," there's the same word, didomai. So the word he uses in verse 6 in the active voice is now used in verse 16, also in the active voice, saying that it's the faith in the person of Jesus. The faith which comes through the person of Jesus has given him perfect soundness. So the idea of faith, all wrapped up in the person of Jesus, who is coupled together to bring about a miracle which has changed a man's life forever. I got to thinking about the risk of this whole thing. Now think of going up to a guy. Here he is, beggar, been there 40 years, lame. You look him right in the eye and say, "In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And then you have the nerve to reach down and grab him by the hand and yank him to his feet. What if it doesn't happen? Think of the embarrassment of that. Think of, oh, sorry, man. Whoa. See, would you do that? We would say, now we're going to pray for the will of God to be done in your life. I'd feel free to do that. But I mean, there's no wiggle room on this. There's no adjustment. There's no, well, it must have not been God's will kind of stuff. This is just grab the hand, yank to the feet, and wham! This whole thing's taking place. See the risk, the embarrassment that could come to the whole early church. Can you imagine the rumor that would have spread on that one? How the other apostles would begin to say, Peter doesn't have it anymore. See, this was risky. Now, I'm not amazed at Peter's boldness, and I'm not amazed at his faith, because that has been given to us several times in the Gospels. For instance, Matthew chapter 16. In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus, of course, is asking his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And in great boldness, I mean, you look at him and say, the boy believes this. He jumps to his feet, puts his fist in the air and says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." I mean, Jesus himself was moved with that and said, "Whoa, you really do believe that? You've been messing around the mind of God. You didn't get that downtown. This came from the mind of God himself. Wow, I'm impressed. In fact, blessed are you, oh Peter." Whoa, this is great, Peter. So that's great faith. You don't look at him and say, he's probably not too sure. No, he's definite. There's no question at all. But see, as the passage goes on, the scene goes on in chapter 16, you'll remember that Jesus began then immediately to talk to them about the content of that messiahship. What kind of Messiah? You believe I'm the Christ. Yes, I believe you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let me tell you what that means. It means I'm going to bleed, suffer, and die. Oh, Peter fell apart. No, Peter, absolutely not. No way. No. Put his finger on his nose, said, "Jesus, don't you say that again. Won't have it. I'll wash your mouth." That was so. Now, wait a minute. You just said I'm the Son of the living God. Well, I believe that. Well, and yet you don't trust what I say? Now, you look at that and say, well, whoa, maybe he really believed this. But when it came down to the play out of that, what happened? The activity and the life. Was his faith bad? Didn't he really believe? Or was his belief not in Jesus as much as in what he had figured out? Was it maybe more in what he had calculated would be thrones, sitting on the right hand, power and authority, and bleed, suffer, and die doesn't fit into that? Where is he off on this? We see the same thing taking place in Matthew chapter 26. Jesus is coming out of the upper room with his disciples, and of course he's discussed with them the fact of a betrayer and all of that scene, as you know well. And as they're on their way down to the Garden of Gethsemane and the whole scene that's going to take place in his death, he turns to his disciples and quotes an Old Testament psalm telling them that they're all going to be like sheep and scatter, and they're all going to deny and turn their back on him. You remember what Peter did. He jumped up. He said, Jesus, you're right about these guys. You can't count on them. Yeah, these other 11 birds, no, I wouldn't. You're probably dead right, but not me. And he said stuff like this. Think of the strength of these words. Even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble. Wow. You don't look at him and say, he's a flake. I mean, you look at him and say, wow. You don't look at him and say, he's doubting. You look at him and say, he's sure confident about that one, isn't he? In fact, Jesus went on to describe exactly what he'd do, deny him 3 times before the old rooster crowed. And what did happen? How did he respond to that? Even if I have to die with you. That's strong. But when it came to the play out of that, was his faith bad? Did he really have faith in Jesus? He sure sounded like it. Or was it that he had faith in himself? Where was see, that's the concern in the passage. So we want to try to deal with that. And I've committed myself, when we started in all of this, to hammer 3 ideas at you, and to give you definitions, and just every now and then come back at it so that you got this so ingrained into your mind that every time anybody said this, you would automatically think this. In other words, I want to brainwash you. And one of those issues is the issue of faith. So some of this we've given before, but we want to do it again. One of the issues we want to talk about then this morning in relationship to this passage and this whole idea of faith and what Peter is doing to the lame man, the lame beggar, and all of this is, what is faith? And we've proposed this definition of faith to you, and want you to memorize this, want you to get this down, because ultimately you won't get to heaven unless you can give this definition. Just kidding. Oh. Faith is invoking the activity of the second party. Faith is invoking the activity of the second party. I'm trying to tell you that faith is invoking the activity of the second party. Invoking the activity of the second party. Yes, invoking the activity of the second party. What did I say? Invoking the activity of the second party, faith. So anytime anybody mentions the word faith, I want you to immediately think, invoking the activity of the second party. Now, invoking is calling, demanding, wanting, crying out for. Hey, asking, that's invoking. Invoking the activity is the movement, the exertion of energy, the stretching of the muscles, the movement of the being. The activity of what? The second party. The second party in this case is not you. You are the first party. Second party in this case, in the context in which we're referring, is Jesus. So faith is invoking the activity of Jesus in my behalf. Faith is saying, I'm not adequate, I can't pull this off. I'm going to let you do for me and in me what I cannot do. Faith is always taking a back seat to the activity of Christ. Faith is always saying, I'm not adequate, so I refuse. I'm going to let you do in my behalf what I can't do. Faith is always engaging the energy and the resource and the sourcing of the person of Jesus in your behalf. Faith is always saying, there's no way I can pull this off. I am going to rely on the one that I know can pull this off, and I'm calling upon his activity in my behalf. Faith is not doing something for Jesus. Faith is letting Jesus do something in and through you. Faith is not serving Jesus doing your best. Faith is allowing Jesus to do his best through you. Faith is not. Faith is not an emotion. Faith is not a feeling. Faith is an intellectual, heart, will decision that says, I absolutely refuse to focus my being, my energy, my life on anything except Jesus, and I will not rely on what I am adequate for. I am only going to rely on His sourcing in my life, invoking the activity of the second party. Now, faith never produces results. Think this through. Faith never produces results. Faith is not positive thinking. Faith is not having no doubts. The absence of doubt is not faith. Faith is invoking the activity of the second party, and it's not the faith that produces the results. He's not saying that in the passage. He is not saying faith is what brought about this miracle. If that were true, it would be the faith that would be the second party. See, faith is invoking the activity. Faith is the activity of evoking the motion of the second party. It's the action of the second party that brings about the result. It's not the faith. Now, faith may be the platform that allows the second party to do it. Yes. Faith may be the switch that is flipped that allows the second party to do the movement, but it isn't faith that gets it done. Otherwise, and I've felt this sometimes around the church, that we had faith in our faith. I'm saved by faith. What saved you? My faith. No, your faith didn't save you. Jesus saved you. Wasn't your faith. Now, your faith set up the platform so He could save you, but you are saved exclusively, 100%, absolutely by the grace of Jesus Himself, not by your faith. Because it isn't faith that saves you, it's Jesus that saves you. So faith never produces the results. Does that make sense to you? Faith does not produce results. Faith engages the activity of another who produces the results. Seems to me that's really important in the passage. So Peter is looking at this crowd saying, oh, it's in His name. It's in His name. It's in the person of Jesus. Faith in the person of Jesus. A faith that's focused entirely upon the person of Jesus and is always invoking His activity in my behalf. It isn't the faith that saved us. It isn't my confidence. I had confidence, man. Faith is not the deal. It's faith in the focus of the faith in the person of Jesus. Now, if that's true, think this through. The amount of faith is not the focus. Well, you just need more faith. No, you don't. I promise you this morning, everybody here, every person in this sanctuary has all the faith that they need. You don't need any more faith than what you have. You have an adequate amount of faith to be everything you ought to be. There's no question about that. The amount of faith is no problem. You have the faith. In Matthew chapter 17, Jesus says, of course, in chapter 10, we've been studying on Saturday night, sent them out into ministry. And when He got done sending them out, they eventually came back, obviously, and were elated at all the miracles that had taken place, how they cast out demons, and all this stuff happened. Then Jesus took 3 of His disciples in the process of that and went to the Mount of Transfiguration. And Moses and Elijah and Jesus were transfigured right before their very eyes, and it was quite a time. So these 3 disciples are watching this whole thing. And while they're up there on the mountain, down in the valley, remaining behind were 9 disciples. I mean, only 3 are up on the Mount of Transfiguration, so you got another 9. What are they doing? Well, getting the bulletin ready for Sunday. Jesus is going off to pray, and who knows how long that'll be. Brother, he could be there for days, so what are we supposed to do? So they're hanging around McDonald's, drinking coffee, messing around, wondering what to do next. And while they're hanging around down there, this guy comes up with his child, his boy, his only son, evidently, and this boy is demon-possessed. He goes into fits and falls into the fire and is going to kill himself, and the man is just frantic. The father is frantic, as you can understand. And he comes to the disciples and says, got to have Jesus, got to have Jesus. Where's Jesus? Got to have him now. And they say, hey, he's not here. He's off. We don't know exactly where, and we don't know when he's going to be back. Oh, I got to have him. I got to have him. They say, what's the problem? And, of course, the man says, well, my boy, he's demon-possessed. And can you picture here? It's one junior higher. He's a bit scrawny, and there's this little demon in him. You can imagine that, can't you? Never mind. So here's this scrawny teenager with a wimpy demon in him. And the disciples look at this scene and say, no big deal. Now, why would they think that? Because they've been out ministering. Come on, that was chapter 10. He gave them the power to cast out demons. They went out and did it. And they'd been casting out demons. And I can hear one of the disciples saying, oh, you should have been there. My first experience in casting out demons. This guy had 100 demons in him, man. And I looked at him and said, in the name of Jesus, and and hey, my picture was on the front page of the newspaper. And while, they were interviewed by Time Magazine. They had fame over this. I mean, they had been successful demon caster-outers. I mean, they knew how to do it. See, they had done it. They knew how to do it. They got this kid over here. They knew just how to do it. And they said, come on, guys, we'll handle this. We can handle this. We can do this. So they brought the kid over. They put their hands on his head just like they'd always done. And they said, hey, you guys form a quartet, sing Nothing But the Blood. And, they got this down. They know the procedure. They know the words. They're confident. I want you to see that. They're absolutely confident in the way to do this. So they're praying away, and of course the demon laughs at them. They do it again, and the demon laughs at them. Sing louder, you guys. And they do it again, and the demon laughs at them. By that time, Jesus is coming back, and the Father runs to Jesus, and Jesus walks over and casts the demon out and gives them a little message. And they finally come to him, the Scripture says, privately, and say, why couldn't we do it? We did do it. Now we can't do it. Why couldn't we do it? Jesus gave that powerful verse 20 of chapter 17 of Matthew, and he looked him right in the eye, and it's just a favorite verse for a lot of us, but he looked him right in the eye and said, because of your unbelief. Now, if I'd have been there, I would have looked him right back. I would have looked him right back in the eye, and I would have said, Jesus, I don't know what you're talking about. Because of your unbelief. Well, what are you talking about? What didn't I believe? Hey, I got the kid over here, put my hands on his head, just like I always did. Hey, you think I'd embarrass myself like that? And have failure if I didn't? Hey, I totally believe that I've done this before. I did hundreds of demons. Now I can't do one wimpy demon. What? And you say I didn't believe? What didn't I believe? I believed everything. I wouldn't even start it if I hadn't believed I could do it. And Jesus said this. Listen to this. For assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, and then we forget that immediately, and we get all wrapped up in the rest of it. You will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will be moved, and nothing will be impossible for you. Oh, move mountains. Why would you want to do that? Get a bulldozer. See, this is not about moving mountains. Do you understand that? Moving mountains is no problem. He is giving them a lesson on faith. If you have faith as a mustard seed. Now you realize if you take a sharpened pencil, take a white sheet of paper and just dot it. That dot is the size of a mustard seed. So that size of faith, the size of a mustard seed, he is saying in that statement that if you have any less faith than this, you wouldn't have any at all. So what he's saying is, this is the least amount of faith you could possibly have. And if you had that, you know what you could do. Nothing would be impossible for you. Well, if that's true, then the amount of faith doesn't matter. If you have any faith, you'll be okay. That's the whole lesson of the passage. If you have any faith at all, you're in. Well, if the problem is not amount of faith, then what's the problem? Focus. object. See, you have all the faith you need. In fact, I propose to you that all of us here today, live by faith. You were built in your very nature to live by faith. You drive down the highway, man, and you come to a hill. You come up to the top of that hill. You don't worry about, what if there's no road on the other side? See, you never think that. You gun that thing and go 55 mile an hour. Woo! Because you know there's going to be road on the other side. By faith. See, you live by faith. You get up in the morning, you go to work, and you work all day by faith that the guy's going to pay you. And you get really disturbed when your faith doesn't work out. So we could just go on with the illustrations of faith. You live consistently, constantly by faith. You were built to live by faith. I want to try to convince you this morning, you have all the faith you need, and you're using your faith. You are absolutely using your faith. Now, Peter, in this confession, let's go back to the confession. He said, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. He's got the faith. What's the problem? Jesus says, I'm a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. See, his faith is not focused on Jesus. His faith is focused on himself, his tradition, what he's figured out, and this bleeding, suffering, dying stuff doesn't fit into the framework of what I'm proposing that my faith is focused on. So it's not a faith problem that Peter has, it's a focus problem, an object problem. Let's go to the Matthew 26 thing. Jesus says, you're all going to be scattered and deny me. Peter says, if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble. Jesus says, yes, you will. He says, even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. That's faith, man. He's got big confidence. But the problem is he has confidence in himself. See, he's invoking the activity of what? Himself. He's not invoking the activity of, and here's what's so interesting in my life. I'll invoke the activity of Jesus, I think, but I end up invoking the activity of myself. Then when it all goes down the tube, I blame him. I'm mad at him. You let me down. I had faith in you. When it wasn't him at all, because I wasn't trusting him, I was trusting myself. Does this make any sense to you? Now, as you get into this, back to Acts chapter 3, you begin to realize then that the faith that we're dealing with in Acts chapter 3 that he's talking about, which is invoking the activity of the second party, that this faith begins to take on the characteristic of the object of its faith. In other words, if I'm invoking the activity of the second party, and the second party is Jesus, my activity, my characteristic of my life is going to take on the activity of Jesus. If I'm invoking the activity of myself, then the faith that I have is going to take on the characteristics of me, which is exactly what I'm astounded with in the passage. See, something has happened to Peter. Up to this time before Pentecost, he had faith. Yes, we all have faith, so that's no problem. And he was acting on his faith. That's no problem because we all act on our faith. But his faith was on himself. So he was invoking the activity of the second party, which was himself. Therefore, the characteristic of his life was always focused on him. What he was going to get out of this. How this was going to aid him. How this was going to adjust in his life. How this would be a base for him. It was all like this. And that his faith took on that characteristic. For instance, he's upset again because, hey, I'm a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. No. That doesn't fit in the framework of what I have faith for. Because my faith is in myself, and I'm talking thrones, and I'm talking right hand, and I'm talking overthrowing Rome, and I'm talking, see, all of that is a focus on himself. So his faith has always had the focus of self-sourcing and self-centeredness and self-desires and what's going to be good for him. And see, we have faith for that. Heal my body, make me strong, pay my bills. See, all of this, I got faith in Jesus to do that. Well, wait a minute. Is your faith in him or on yourself? And when you get upset because he doesn't seem to do the things you want done, you're upset. Could that be because your faith isn't in him, it's in you and what you want? Well, that's hard, isn't it? It's really hard. Now, if I'm going to have faith in Jesus, and he's going to be the focus and the object of my faith, and I'm going to invoke the activity of the second party, and it's always Jesus, do you know what that means? I'm going to have the characteristics of Jesus, which is about what? Hey, lame man, this is about you. This isn't about a hidden agenda. This isn't about what I'm going to get out of this. Because you know what Peter's going to get out of this? Upset the leaders of Israel, disturb the status quo, end up in jail. Persecution is going to start out of this. The whole persecution thing in the book of Acts begins to spill out of this. The leadership of Israel is going to get all irate out of this. This is all comes out of this scene right here. So he would be better off to forget a lame man and just go on and deal with the decent people. But see, this is not about Peter and not about what he wants and not about his safety. This is about a focus on the person of Jesus. And now I give you. See, his giving now is altogether different than his giving has ever been. He's always been giving, but it was always given with a hidden agenda and a self-focus. Now his giving is with no strings attached. His giving takes on the characteristics of Jesus, which is, I'm just interested in you. Have you ever met anybody who didn't want to use you? If you haven't, let me introduce you to Jesus. And everyone who invokes his activity in their behalf has the same characteristic. Have you ever felt like a number on the board? Do you notice we refuse to have a board? We never talk numbers because this is not about numbers. This is about you. Does that make sense to you? Because this is not about using you. This is about, could we be Jesus in your life? Could we be a church like that? Could we be a church who could promote revival and the whole town got saved and they all became Baptist? And we'd be happy. Would that be okay? Could it be that we would be more interested in people finding Jesus than having people in our building? Is that could we be that kind of people? That's what he's dealing with here. Got to move on. What is faith? Move to the second. What is the source of faith? Now, you'll note in verse 16, and we're just lightly going to touch this. If you come and say, well, hey, I want to do miracles. So if faith is what does miracles, tell me how to do that. There's always been people like that. Simon the sorcerer, he wanted to buy this stuff. So there's always been those kind of people. But that's not what we're dealing with at all. You'll notice in verse 16, and his name, through faith in his name, has made this man strong. Yes, the faith which comes through him. The Greek word through is dia, which is a channel of an action. So he says, this is so powerful, and we're only going to mention this because we're going to save it for later. But yes, the faith which comes through Jesus has given him this perfect soundness. So it's faith that's provided the platform, but do you know even where the faith came from? It came from Jesus. So even the faith that is the instrument that gets this done came from Jesus himself. So you got two great facts then. You have the faith. There's no question at all. Don't you come and say, well, I just don't have enough faith. You do. Size of a mustard seed. If you had any less, you wouldn't have any at all. So if you got any faith, you got enough. So you've got enough faith. And you say then, well, what about the responding to the faith? My responder isn't working. Yes, it is, because you act on your faith all the time. You got up out of bed this morning and acted by faith. You got in your car and acted by faith. You drove here and acted by faith. You came here and acted by faith. So your responder is working. So you have the faith and your responder is working. So you are living by faith. So I'm trying to convince you this morning that everybody in this place is invoking the activity of the second party. Well, then what's my problem? You got the wrong second party. Because you know how to live by faith, and you've got faith. The problem is in the object. What is the object of my faith? So the difference, get this, the difference between the Christian and the non-Christian is not faith. The difference is object. Object. Now you got two options. You can either invoke the activity of Jesus or you can invoke the activity of self. Those are the only two options you got. Amount of faith is not the issue. You come in here on a Sunday morning, you come over and you plop down in a chair. I've not seen any of you look at the chair, shake the chair, kick the chair. I don't come to the chair and say, oh, sweetheart, would you sit down first? And have her test the chair. No, you walk in the door, you come over, you plump down by faith in the chair. You invoke the activity of the chair. You have no problem. You do that every Sunday morning. You formed a habit of it. You do it totally by faith. You don't question it. You just wham. Down you go, sitting in the chair. One morning you come in, you come over by faith, and you invoke the activity of that chair. You sit down in that chair, and it collapses, and you're on the floor. I rush over, of course. I dust you off. I pick you up. I help you stand to your feet. I show sympathy for you, and I look you right in the eye and say, oh, if you'd only had more faith. And you would say, well, how could I have any more faith? I didn't even think about it. It was routine activity. I just came in, wham, didn't question it, never question it. The problem is not amount of faith. The problem is the unworthy object of your faith. Trying to make this as simple as I can. If you could get a hold of that. Well, I'm flat on my face. I'm a lame beggar by the gate beautiful. What's my problem? Oh, if you could just invoke the activity of another party. If Jesus, you'd just become the total object of your faith. If you could just get focused on Him and focused on Him alone. If you could quit mixing your faith. See, I have a little bit of faith in you. I have a little bit of faith in my wife. I have a little bit of faith in the church. I have a little bit of faith in the Bible. I have a little bit of faith in Jesus. And I have a whole lot of faith in me. What would happen if I could gather all my faith together and focus on Him and Him alone? And in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. I'm not talking a doctrine. I'm not talking an idea. I'm not talking about a belief system. I'm not talking of church. I'm talking a real, live, divine person called Jesus. Could you take your whole life and your circumstance and bring it right up to him and say, oh, here it is, you take over. I have proved I'm an unworthy object, because every time I've had faith in myself, I've gone down. I've proved I can't pull it off. I've proved I'm not adequate. I've proved I'm not sufficient. I've proved that there are things beyond my ability. I've proved that. So Jesus, I'm going to trust you, who is alone the one who is adequate to handle my sin. And by faith, in total activity, invoking the activity of Jesus in Jesus alone, find all you need. Put me on my feet, Jesus. Grab me by the hand, Jesus. By faith, by faith, by faith. I have faith. I have all the faith I need. My ability to respond to faith is acting, because I do it all the time. But Jesus, I confess this morning, I have focused my activity, I have focused my faith on the activity of myself. The very fact that I take over, the very fact that I do what I want to do, the very fact that I figure it out myself, the very fact that I operate out of my own self-confidence, the very fact that I am where I am proves to me that I have literally acted upon the activity of myself, faith in myself. In the name of Jesus, I renounce that this morning. I renounce all faith in myself. I will have faith in you and you and you and you alone. Come and move in my behalf. Could I be the man you've dreamed I could be? Could I march into the chaos of my scene and find the resource totally adequate? Because the only limit to my faith is the object of my faith. And Lord, I've found my limitation so great. For I've had faith in myself and have been so limited. What is your limit, Jesus? Where can't you go? What can't you do? And the truth of it is, Lord, I've given my life to everything but you. I've given my life to my body drives. I've given my life to my own emotions. I've given my life to my own desires. I've given my life to my own culture, my own traditions. I've given my life to my own mind, my own mind thinking. Could I be yours and yours alone today? Heads are bowed. I invite you to gather together every ounce of your faith, every mustard seed particle. I invite you to pull it all together and place it all in one called Jesus. If you want to spend the rest of this week just sitting here, I will bring by witness after witness after witness who will yell at you and say, he never fails. He will never let you down. I will bring witness after witness who will say again and again to you that he forgives, that he is the lover of your soul, that he literally makes all things work together for good, that you can absolutely trust him. Could I tell you this morning, I have never found anyone, any place, who had embraced him in totality, Whoever said to me, I wish I hadn't have done it. You have all the faith you need. You know how to respond in faith. Would you focus on Him? Would you risk everything on Him alone? Invoking the activity of Jesus. Altars open. Moments of seeking, moments of responding, moments of saying yes. What a way to start a new year. Totally focused on someone who's adequate to handle your life. Are you adequate for this new year? What's going to make this new year any better than the last one? What messed up the last year? What chair collapsed on you last year? Could I invite you to one who does not collapse? Want to join me in seeking?